Good evening and welcome to the Kansas Legislature on Smoky Hills Public Television. My name is Mike Walker. I'm with the Docking Institute of Public Affairs at Fort Hays State University. Fort Hays State, the largest university in western Kansas. That's a joke because there's only one university in western Kansas. But we are the third largest university in Kansas. With me today I have two representatives from the state legislature. On my left is Representative Tory Marie Arnberger from District 112 and out of Great Bend. And on my right is Representative Ken Rahjes from District 110 out of Agra.
Agra. You're going to get it. You're going to get it. Good.
I apologize. I don't know.
Fine.
Okay. This is a call-in show, so we do hope folks call in. The number is below on your screen, but I'll read it off. 1-800-337-4788. Again, a call-in show, and this is a great opportunity for you to speak to your representatives. I think I'll start off with asking you all to just take a minute or two to describe your district. What kind of some of the communities and what are some major employers in your area? We'll start with Tory and then we'll move back to Ken.
Awesome. Well, thank you. My name's Tory Marie Arnberger. I'm the state rep from the 112th District, which includes towns of Great Bend, Hoisington, and the small town of Red Wing. A majority of my district is agriculture along with oil field, and then, of course, our school districts are our largest employers. So that is a majority. It's nice, the fact that I can go to Walmart or go to church and know a majority of my district. I can imagine being in Wichita and not going one of those places and not seeing somebody. So
I do have a follow-up to that. It lists that you were a teacher before, or maybe you are a teacher.
Yeah, so right now I teach at Otis Bison. So it's outside of my district, but I'm the business teacher over there. And yeah.
All right, good to hear. I'm on the school board at USD 49. So I'm always interested in education. So.
And I got my business education degree from Fort Hays.
Okay.
So yep, I'm a Tiger as well.
All right. Well, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
All right, Ken. Sorry, we're off.
That's all right. Are we out of time?
No, not quite. All
right. In the 110th district, Norton, Phillips, Rooks counties, portion of Ellis County, the western and northern parts, and then a little sliver of Graham County. So obviously agriculture, oil production, manufacturing. Tamco asphalt products in Phillipsburg, New Age over in Norton, as well as the Toma Corporation.
Right.
We have a couple other ones in Phillipsburg. We have Short Line Railroad, a few other ones that do some different things, and so we have a very diverse economy. And obviously, oil prices were up. That would help a lot of our areas. We have a lot of good things going on in Rooks County as well, Wilkins Manufacturing. So overall, we're plugging along. I think if the economy a little bit stronger, we had a little more confidence, that would be a good thing. The community I live is Agra. It's on the far eastern part of the district. And so I guess in a sense that if there was the longest stretch is kind of from Agra to Ellis, it's about a 90-minute drive. So and again, as Representative Arnberger said, we have some representatives in Johnson County that can walk their district every day at maybe 4 or 6 square blocks, and they go to a lot of apartments and they don't fathom the distances we have to go and the things we have to do, and they can go to one or two things and in a sense say their district is covered. Well, we've been off the last couple of days, and I've had full schedules and got a full day again tomorrow, and that's just kind of things we do. We want to make sure that we're accessible to our constituents.
Very good. Thank you. What kind of issues are folks talking about in your district, in Great Bend and the other cities that are on their minds?
Well, I think the tough part right now is, of course, everyone knows about school finance because it's so
on my list.
Publicized. But I know one thing, and we don't really have anything to do with it, is just property taxes. And what do you do about that? And that's not our area to talk about, but we are at the same time. I mean, it was something that the Republican nominee for the gubernatorial race, he spoke about property taxes a little bit. But it's one of those things too where I know ever since I've been elected, the tax lid has been something that they've been bringing up. So it's hard because we're taxing our people out of our communities and out of our state, and when you have a fixed income, and right now I'm looking at buying a house, and just looking at property taxes, that's kind of and that's where I'm at the point where, do I really want to live over here, or would I much rather live out in the country and not have such high property taxes? So that's something that we have to look at.
Okay, very good. Yeah, thank you. How about you, Ken? What are the folks talking about in your district?
Well, I think, obviously taxes is one of them. And what I always tell folks is we try to do every day to fight so the property taxes don't increase, because that's at the county level with schools. This year I'm chairing higher ed budget, and so I think that's become part of the conversation as well. And then you look at education, I would like to look at it really from like a pre-K through 20. What that means is that use education together. What's happened is we have pitted K through 12 education versus higher education.
I see.
And it's really bad, when we're trying to know that we have to also invest in higher education as well. And so far we've been able to do a little bit of that, first time in several years. But we've got to make sure, obviously, that kids are able to graduate and be prepared from our Kansas high schools. But we also need to make sure that those colleges are there and those can be affordable. And that's one of the things we're trying to attack, is to keep tuition down and work with our leaders of our Regents institutions so that tuition doesn't have to go up. So, that and just the overall economy. People want to make sure they have a job, even though we do have a lot of jobs.
Right.
But are they paying the wage that it should?
Right.
And so those are the concerns, the concerns of regulations, taxes, and so on about wanting to be an entrepreneur and start your own business. And so those are the things that we talk about. I think the other thing that always gets talked about at our meetings is transportation. The transportation plan. There was some discussion over before the session. The task force that was done. People are looking at our roads. They know they travel the state. They're still in pretty good shape. Yes, I think I mentioned this program probably a year ago. You could go to you could close your eyes. Don't be driving. Close your eyes, and you can tell when you go to a new state. You can. Believe me, you can tell when you cross into Oklahoma, cross into Colorado, go into Nebraska, go into Missouri. We still have good roads, but what we have to do is make solid investments to make sure that those are being taken care of. And we can play politics all we want to about this, that, and the other, but if we're not going to make investments, and the short-term gains bring us long-term pain. And so that's one of the things that I hope that what we'll be doing now when we come back to finish up the session is to hold the line and to keep more money in the KDOT budget.
Okay.
So that we were able to do a lot of projects. Looking forward with the new secretary, Ms. Lorenz, that we can get some things done. And so I don't know if that's, if you look about, how can we all work together, well, I hope that's it, that we can have some wins for really all parts of the state.
I know that the KDOT secretary, she's actually coming to Great Bend.
Yes, that's right.
End of April, I believe, and so that'll be great. When we have Venture Corporation, so they're obviously they've been one of the owners was on the task force for the new. I don't know if it's going to be called T-Works 2.0 or what the new plan's going to be called, but so that's great that she's getting out of Topeka, going to these other areas. And last year and the year before, we heard a lot about a fuel tax. I haven't heard anything of a fuel tax this year. I don't know if that's something that is still on the table, but I don't know. We got to figure out how do we get funding and to make sure that it is protected, and we're not using the bank of KDOT anymore. And so if you use a fuel tax, at least it's earmarked just for transportation budget. So
good. All right. I'll remind viewers that this is a call-in program, and we're relying on your calls to keep the show moving along. 1-800-337-4788. You mentioned some issues already that I've had listed as to discuss. Let's go ahead and, do you have any information for the audience about school funding? any activity this week?
Well, you know, and again, I think it's, do you read the headlines or do you kind of get into the meat of the matter, I think is the way I would describe it.
Okay.
Both the House and Senate came up with their plans. One of the last things we were going to do and didn't do on the House side was talk about the funding plan that the House Education Budget Committee came up with. That was not discussed. So one thing they did do is they took a Senate bill and put some language in for different policies. And so that was what's passed out of the House. And so the position we're in right now in negotiating from the legislature side is using the dollar amount, which is what the governor requested. So that's the dollar amount, putting our policies. Will they last? I don't know. But quite honestly, you look at some of those policies, they don't really work here. They don't work in Western Kansas. They just don't. I mean, let's be honest. And they've been watered down. And so, you know, what our hope is if there's enough votes, and I'm not sure where I am on the thing, but if that truly gets us out of the lawsuits, then that's what we'll do moving forward. So that's where the discussion is. Senator Baumgartner, who chairs the Senate side, says, we did policy last year. We're not going to do other policy things, and so it may just be simply a matter of dollar amounts and how much we're willing to invest for a long term. The House version, one of the things that was a contentious point was it only went out 2 years rather than 4. Because we're dealing with a annual budget instead of a biannual budget, and so that's kind of taking some getting used to. And you also have to understand, with the new governor, many folks in the legislature have not dealt with the Democratic governor, and so there's been those changes. So that's kind of where we are. It's going to be pretty fluid this next week.
And I know we have a call real quick, but just to piggyback off that, I spoke to my superintendents, and I mean, and this is something we have to remember, and we are huge advocates of it, especially with Western Kansas versus urban Kansas, if you want to say that,
sure.
Is the fact every school district is ran differently, and it's ran so it will meet their needs. And so when you do the just add the money to the base aid, it allows the school districts to spend it how they deem to be seen best fit. So obviously what's working in Johnson County is not going to work in Great Bend, is not going to work in Otis Bison, is not going to work in Hayes.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Yes, we do have a caller on the line. Bob, thank you for calling. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have a question that I wanted to ask about privatizing operations of state government. I would like to hear what they would say about how our work on the new prison is coming over at Lansing, and also if it's going to be possible to have more privatizing into the building of roads, perhaps a new turnpike. Thank you.
All right. Who wants to jump into that one first?
You want to go first, or me too?
Well, I'm trying to think of a response. I know I have been very active in Barton County with our crime rate and with working with our sheriff. And for instance, he just had a 11-person arrest a couple of days ago, and there was all drug conviction, but every single one of them has already been arrested before due to drugs. And so what's happening, especially in my area, is we're just a revolving door. And they're going to jail, and then they're getting busted, or they're getting bailed out with drug money, and then it's doing all over again and all over again. And so I got to visit our county jail, and I can proudly say it was my first time visiting it, but it was eye-opening, and we are, I think, 110 bunk jail in Barton County, and it's constantly full. And so I am curious. I would love to go to Lansing and to El Dorado. Just see. I was told when you go to Lansing, it is it's not what you expect by any means. Have you been to Lansing? No. I haven't been, and so
it's not the new one.
So, anyways, I was just told it's just be prepared. And so, as far as privatizing, I was actually speaking with the majority leader beginning of the session, and we were just talking about privatizing the it's on the top of my tongue. We have the 3 of Sunflower and for Medicaid. I don't know.
Care or something?
Yeah, the three industries or 3 companies that we're using.
Oh, I see.
Anyways, and he said in the end that has saved the state quite a few, I mean, billions of dollars. So that's kind of stuff I haven't really looked into, and that was all pre my time, but I would be curious if on privatizing, does it really save money, and is it where we need to be, and it's not just we just can't vote on it tomorrow.
I haven't heard much in the news of a lot of move to privatize road construction or the turnpike. More turnpikes.
I think there's a number
there's
of
probably
things.
some.
Bob, thanks for the call.
Yeah.
Lansing right now is on I guess time and budget to be done when it's supposed to be. It'll be I believe the end of this year is what they're planning, and then some of that prisoners moving around will go back. I understand Lansing will probably be full, so there's going to be some things down the road we're going to have to look at as far as that goes. Privatization, there may be some things to look at. Road construction, I mean, if the money is there, if it's a short-term thing, it's all going to kind of depend. It's going to depend on the oversight. I understand, with our foster care system that was privatized. Quite honestly, it may have saved us some money. Did it really work? That's going to be for another discussion, because this is only an hour-long show, and so we're trying to right that ship. And sometimes, while I'm very much in favor of smaller government and trying to do those things, some things you just can't if you don't have the oversight. And you can't just say, well, here's the contract, here's the money, go after it. And so that's where one of my concerns are. As far as the turnpike, there is a bill that did pass the House this last week dealing with the way we possibly will do turnpiking, if you will. One of the things is existing road. Well, let's put make I-70 a turnpike. Well, it's not that simple.
Right.
What they're looking at, if we do new turnpikes, would be certain areas, maybe like a HOV lane in some of the congested parts around Wichita.
Okay.
It would be an additional lane, and it would be for some short term. So as far as the traditional way of looking at it is not the way we're looking at it right now. So the bill that passed was to give KDOT the authority to look into that as we go down the road, and with the idea of, in some of those congested places, to maybe add an extra lane. So that's kind of where we are. But that's one of the things I think we as Republicans are going to be fighting the next 3 years, as we have this year, is to hold back on the spending. Yeah, it showed we had a big ending balance, but to me that's a big stack of IOUs. And so there's not this additional money that, we all don't put our little caps on and play Santa Claus. We cannot do that. We have to be fiscally responsible, and that's what I think we've tried to do in the Appropriation Committee, as well as the Tax Committee, try to look at some sound tax policy, if you will.
Our debt per capita is over $1,500 a person. So just because we have an ending balance, that we have so much debt that we have to pay off. One of my budget committees I'm on, we looked at the Department of Administration. They put all the debt in their debt payoff,
right,
in their budget, and just that was, to me, was breathtaking. I know that Nebraska, that's about $20 a person. Granted, they have a different ending balance and they can't go in the hole, but still, $20 a person or $1,500 a person.
It seemed like it did take us a while to get into the situation we're in, so it makes sense it's going to take a while to get out of that situation. So the turnpike idea in Wichita, basically an HOV lane, people could buy
possibly
passes to get on that, something like that.
I mean, there's a lot of ideas. There's not necessarily a particular way, but they said the existing roads would stay the way they are. I know there was some concern on the eastern part of the state that as far as the traffic count, K10 has a heavy traffic count. Well, then all of a sudden you have the traditional Kansas Turnpike. Then if you would in a sense have a toll road of K10. Then if you didn't want to pay that toll or couldn't afford to pay that toll, you'd be on 24 and or 32. It just wouldn't be functional. And so that's where I think is moving forward. Trying to find the best use and to alleviate and to do our best with good roads.
But thinking outside the box and trying some new ideas.
Right.
basically. Yeah.
Looking at things.
All right, sounds good. We do have another caller, Carol from El Dorado. Go ahead, Carol.
Yes, hi. You're talking about the turnpike. I remember the 1950s when it was built, and also in Missouri and Oklahoma. And they said as soon as it got paid for, they were going to stop charging. Well, Missouri and Oklahoma stopped charging years and years and years ago. But Kansas is still charging for the turnpike. How come?
Is that the...
That's a good idea, Carol. Thanks for the call. The Cimarron Turnpike in Oklahoma, you still have you change it every once in a while as you go down through that. And I think that I'm not sure if that's the way the Kansas Turnpike was sold or not. The Kansas Turnpike kind of stands by itself. Mm-hmm. They're self-sustaining. And granted, yes, the rates have gone up. I grouse about that as well. But the way it's set up is it's an ongoing maintenance situation. I'm not sure exactly how Missouri and Oklahoma do. You know, if their departments of transportation pay for all those. But you know, the Kansas Turnpike is pretty nice. Of course, El Dorado, you're exactly directly affected by that.
Right.
But that's kind of the whole idea is as you know, kind of those bonds or whatever get paid off. Mm-hmm. Then they go and do another project, and so that's. I don't think the turnpike will always kind of be the turnpike. It's kind of a sidearm in the sense of KDOT, but they have their own director, they have their own board of governors, and so on. So
I was told from my road construction folks back home that it was written that once all construction ceases, then we'll no longer be a toll. Well, let's be
When the
realistic.
construction ever cease.
Yeah.
Always.
So that was their little catch-22. So.
Okay. All right. Any more discussion of transportation? You want to?
well, one of the things we're working on with the budget too
some
is to
other-
try to put some of the money back in for working with the counties. And
Okay.
specifically for bridges. That we talk a lot about roads and the condition of our roads and the potholes and so on, but one of the things we cannot neglect are our bridges. And so that's working its way through. Again, nothing is a sure thing yet. We have the big omnibus, the big budget bill, and that's when both the House and Senate negotiate. But that's something that transportation sees as a priority to try to put at least some money back in. And those counties can help draw that money out. So, again, bridges are a huge cost, and so.
Well, I'm stating the obvious, but transportation is extremely important out here in western Kansas. It's important everywhere, I suppose, but it would really hurt western Kansas if we didn't keep the roads up.
Well, it would
As you
hurt.
mentioned, the distance across your own district is quite a way.
Well, it is, and I think we talk a lot about. The East says, well, that's where the people are. Correct. We put a big investment in eastern in around Johnson County, and fine, needed. They're growing, not a problem. But all the stuff that comes from the west has to come on our roads, and then the raw produce that we grow, those commodities, they have to go somewhere, and you need to have good transportation infrastructure. And so I think that's the thing where. Whoever's in leadership, or the legislature as well as the governor's office, need to find those priorities. And to me, transportation is bipartisan. Everybody pretty much uses some sort of vehicle to get, whether it be a gas-powered, electric, or a bicycle, or a horse. They want to make sure they have a decent place to
Gotta make
travel.
sure you get somewhere. That's right. Alrighty, well, let's move on to, we talked about school funding for a bit. Anything you want to discuss on higher education? You kind of touched on it already, but is there any news from the legislature about the higher education funding?
Well, what the House
go ahead.
What the House did is, and the governor recommended bringing back the 8.3 of the cuts to make the whole back from 17.
Right.
So that the House added an additional $10 million to be distributed back to the Board of Regents funding mechanism, and the Senate put in 5. So there's a difference there of 10 to 5.
Okay.
So the total package, it would be roughly 18 18.3 million. Okay. So we're trying to work with that and trying to make sure that it's not probably quite enough to reduce tuition, but again, we're trying to make sure that college presidents and those we need to work maybe a little harder, and that it's easy to say because everybody can say they've cut. We all know Fort Hays, Emporia, all of them have KU, K-State even.
Right.
So who haven't I named? Pittsburgh. but so that's one of those things that we're trying to make a priority as well. And we may not get everything they requested. They requested a lot of money.
Sure.
But if we can get a little bit and to show a good faith effort that we are working towards that goal, I think that's it, rather than, I could tell you a story and then in the end won't try to fight and defend it. Instead, let's try to get a little peace and then show that we are trying to make that effort.
Very good. Yes, and we have another caller, Nick from Victoria. Go ahead, Nick.
All right, I appreciate you guys taking my call. I'd like to hear what the two panelists have to say about, one issue that's come up this session and some previous ones are trying to decrease some of the rural flight, from the rural areas to urban areas. And I'd also like to get a response from the two panelists about the current state of state agencies in general, whether it be, various budget constraints they're under, employee pay, and those types of things. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, let's tackle the rural, they're both difficult issues. Rural population loss.
I know that in my area, like I said earlier, that with oil and ag being two of the main components of my area, just population from the 2010 census to, I think I looked it up in 2016, we've lost over 600 people. And so it's just little things such as, they said before, maybe in 2012 or so, the max we had was 34 houses on the market, and that was a good amount, and now we have like 150 just in Great Bend. So people are leaving and there's nothing bringing them back. So I think that's something. I know one thing in Great Bend we used to have, or we still do have Fuller Brush, but it used to employ 600 folks. Now I think they're maybe a little over 100. So it's just little things that we gotta look into. I know our school district, they're always hiring. I think we had 34 new teachers this past year just in Great Bend.
Wow.
And I think that we had to use quite a few of them or long-term subs.
Wow.
So we got to figure out that there's just so much that goes on to it, and we need to know how do we bring people to these rural areas. For me, I grew up in Great Bend. I want to stay in Great Bend for the rest of my life. I love everything about it, but so many people from my graduating class went off to KU, K-State, so forth, and they wanted to get out.
Somewhere else.
Yeah, and so it's heartbreaking because, and I don't know if they just, maybe their family wants to leave. I know a lot of families are leaving, especially once their kids graduate, they're out.
Right.
So there's a lot to it, and how do you tackle it? I don't know. Again, it's kind of like when we talk about school funding. Each school spends their money a different way to make it work for that school. Same thing with rural communities. Each community is going to have to figure out their one thing to make it different, to bring folks back.
Yes, that makes sense. I could see though that there needs to be, from my perspective, a larger policy to help rural areas, because yes, each community can address the issue in different ways, but if there doesn't seem to be a coordinated effort, I would think there's going to be some issues.
Well, this year, Speaker Ron Reichman decided that rural is important, maybe, and give it more than simply lip service. Of course, Speaker Reichman's from Meade, so he understands Southwest Kansas and rural Kansas.
Right.
So rural revitalization, chaired by Don Heineman and Dighton. They've tried to tackle these issues, and we found there's a myriad of issues. I think one of the things that brings folks together and trying to work on, I guess, the folks in rural areas leaving and moving is broadband. We talk about that. That's something that we spent a lot of time this year and trying to work on those situations. I think it's going to be a slow process, but really it's a federal issue as well. We have to engage Congressman Marshall, our senators, and others, and almost go at it the way we did with rural electrification. And others have said this as well, but really to go after, because I think the millennial kids, right now, they go off to college, they experience that in big, in cities that have high-speed internet. And we know some of our communities, even now, like one of my companies that's in my district is Nextech, which I should have mentioned that at the beginning. Very important company.
Yes.
And in some of our small communities, Agra population, 300 or so, you can get up to a gig. A gig if you pay for it. But now I'm 2.5 miles out in the country. I have DSL.
Yeah.
And so that's my challenge is people truly living out in the country. So to me that's even a different definition than rural. But the other thing is shop at home. Shop at home.
Shop local.
It's nice to go to those big box stores, and we all do. But nobody's pure, but we have a hardware store, the Sawyer family in Phillipsburg, an Ace Hardware store.
Okay.
They have just about everything you need. If not, they'll order it for you. Yeah, you may pay a little more, but you know what? They employ a lot of people. And that's how we do it, if we have the right attitude. And I know that may seem Pollyannish, but it's true. It is absolutely true. The hardware stores, those folks are struggling. You may pay a little bit more, but you know what? When if your faucet breaks at 11 o'clock,
money stays local too.
At 11 o'clock at night, they'll probably come down and make sure that you'll get things fixed. We have good folks in Playville that do that, and the big box stores don't. Now, I don't want to run out of time about the other things. State agencies, boy, I hope they're getting better. It was time for a refresh. The Senate's working through the process of new cabinet secretaries, and I think the Kansas Board of Agriculture thinks is doing quite well. So they they're kind of off on themselves in Manhattan, but overall, some of the state employees got pay raises. We're looking at that again and doing it differently. Last time there was some confusion on who didn't get raises, and it caused a lot of angst, and that was not our intent, but the way it was interpreted was. So that's something that's going to come out, hopefully, that stays with, that was in part of our budget, is to again try to make those the wages competitive. We hope that the attitudes are good, that they enjoy working for the state. Many of them do a great service. They're appreciated. I know they're underpaid. But one thing we have done is we've made a real commitment to capers, and we made that payment early. The governor wanted to do some other things, re-amortize it. We said, no, we're going to make that payment. We're in line to make the payments then this year, not kicking a can down the road, and have a plan to continue to fully fund capers. That's a contract we made with folks, and we have to stick with it. That is one of the top priorities, for me anyway, as we go through all this process, is that capers is funded, capers is taken care of.
Very good.
To go off of the agency portion, so I am the vice chair for the I'm the vice chair for the general government budget, and we looked at the judicial branch, their budget, and our district judges are paid their 51st out of all the states and District of Columbia. So that's kind of, they said, by no way, shape, or form are we stating that our judges can't feed their families, because they can, but it's just when it comes to ranking. So, and they said, though, the hard part is the non-judicial staff. And we had a gal come up and testify, and she said she works 3 jobs in Ellis County just to feed her family. And so we did a 5-year plan, because it was $20 million is what the judicial branch was asking for, and that's a lot of money. There's no way we could do that in 1 year. So we sat down with them, and we did a 3-year phase-in for the full amount for the non-judicial staff, and then a 5-year phase-in with the judicial, the judges. And so the hard part for me when I'm looking at this with the judges, and I get where they're coming from, but if you were to divide out, we have under 300 judges in the state of Kansas, and they're asking for, I think it was $7.8 million. I don't know, it was a lot of money. If you were to divide out all that money equally, and we know that's not how it works, but that's $40,000 a judge they would get as a pay raise. That's a lot of money. So my heart goes to the non-judicial staff, because you can't run a courtroom without them.
Right.
We need them. But for the judges, I get where they're coming from, but at the same time, welcome to public service. So we make not a lot of money to do what we do. So I think a lot of people, they lose money to be up in the legislature. So
Part of the process of judicial is in our process right now is the Senate took all that out. So that's going to be a negotiating standpoint. Yeah, I get it. I mean, you know, our staff members, we're making the effort to get them up to speed where they need to be. It's going to be a process. Hopefully, you know, that at least that phase in again shows the commitment that we're making. As far as judges, absolutely. I mean, we're looking at and maybe I look at it a little bit differently. Is that we're looking at the retirements of judges. We're going to need folks to be in those positions. Right. So we're gonna have to do that. Slowly but surely, and as much as it pains us, but you also have to understand some of these things get involved in politics. Imagine that, where it's, you know, it's more than just, well, I don't like you or I like you. It's because of certain things that go on within the judicial system across the street from the Capitol that may skew that you know, that, and I don't want to be an inside baseball, but let's just be honest about it. And so we're looking at, you know, a process that probably will take a few years, but you know, we still have folks that are willing to be judges. But you know, in talking with folks, also we have had you know, when you had an opening, you used to have a lot of applications. You don't have so many anymore. Right. And we also know what happened recently with one of our appellate court. You know, maybe we need to continue to dig a little harder. But Representative Arnberger is correct as well. I mean, it is public service, but you know, most of us in public service know what we are getting into. But on the other hand, I want the best and brightest to also be judges.
But I do think it's encouraging for folks if there's a plan in place. Yes, you might not be able to fund everything right off the bat, but if they know you're working hard to put a plan in place and follow with that plan, I think that's encouraging for folks. Yeah. One thing you mentioned on when we were talking about rural electrification and broadband, et cetera, is how important, and I know this is going to sound, I'm in the wrong part of the country to say this, but how important government is for rural areas. Because if we don't have the government, the state helping with, say, broadband technology, is it going to get done elsewhere?
Well, you have private industry, but that
I don't mean things like funded by the government totally.
That does some of that, but I'd much rather have a partnership, public-private partnership.
See, I meant
hit a chord. Public-private partnerships are good things. Right. I don't want to necessarily rely on the government to go set my internet up. But I think, and I wouldn't paint necessarily here to say that this part of the world is anti-government. I think our constituents, and I can't speak for Representative Arnberger, but I think our constituents know there is a role for the government, local, state, federal, and part of it is to make sure we're spending their money the right way, investing it, whatever term you want to use. But I think internet, the broadband situation, some of the other needs, you know, it's going to take outside the box thinking and partnerships. You know, instead of wringing our hands and saying, well, I don't know what we're going to do about rural Kansas. Well, we need a strong rural Kansas. And so what it is, Representative Arnberger and I, with our Johnson County colleagues, we both sit around them, or Sedgwick County, and to have those conversations and to make sure that they understand that, you know, while you know, we did some things this past week on helping a lot to help Wichita when it comes to aviation.
Very good.
Well, aviation, to me, right behind agriculture, is key for our economy. We want to make sure Spirit has the employees they need. And also, Garmin in Johnson County does a lot of things with the aviation industry. And Independence is a good aviation town. Norton The Natoma Corporation in Norton has contracts
That's right.
with a couple of those companies, Garmin, Rockwell, so on. So that's some of the things, and so we just and so we support those, and then when they support us, it's a difficult balance.
Are you able to spend much time when you're back in Topeka? And you mentioned already meeting with some folks that represent Johnson County, et cetera. Are you able to make it a point to reach out to some of the folks in, say, eastern Kansas to make sure they understand that we're still out here? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But, contacting folks. 'Cause I know a lot of folks in Kansas City, and they think that the state line ends in, let's say, Lawrence. We really are out here still. So
Yeah. So west of me, there's only, including myself, 12 representatives. That's half the state.
Yeah, right.
So that's something too. And there are rural areas east of us,
Sure.
Absolutely.
Of course,
But the first thing when people think about rural Kansas, they automatically think about western Kansas. And so
Right.
it's just kind of stereotyped in their brain. I have a lot of friends up there from the Wichita area and the Johnson County area and the Topeka area. There's one representative that comes to mind that he's who I go to whenever there's an issue that I'm like, hey, I don't understand. This is specifically going to help your area. I don't get, can you kind of explain this to me?
Sure.
Especially in the Wichita area. And then likewise, I'll make sure we're in the same office area. And so I'll go into him and say, okay, so this is really important to us, and let me tell you why.
Right.
And he knows nothing about agriculture. And one thing I'm excited about is in the next couple weeks or so, Farm Bureau and some other folks, they get together and they do an ag day.
Oh, yes.
And it's great for those areas, and it's usually in eastern Kansas because, let's be realistic, who wants to drive west of Salina? Not very many people. And so it's up there, and so they go visit a farm, they get to actually see what we're talking about. So that's great, because I can think of a lot of them, they'd have no reason to. And I think of fourth graders at Grape Bend, all the Grape Bend schools, they do a kids ag day. And they spend a day and they do a hay rack ride, and they stop and they go over, this is the box of cereal. Let's go over the ingredients. Okay, the wheat is in there. Now this is wheat that you see.
This is where it comes from.
Yeah, so and it's neat. And they get to watch how to milk a cow and all of that stuff. So a lot of folks don't know that. So.
Okay. All right, Bob again. Go ahead, Bob.
Yes. Well, let me say, first of all, I want to thank both of our representatives there for representing us. I know it takes a lot of sacrifice on their part to take part in the process. I would ask them to maybe address the question of industrial hemp. I know we've been trying to get it started here in Kansas, and there's been some movement, but I'd like to hear them discuss what the possibilities are for growing hemp, particularly for use for medicinal purposes.
So we just passed it this week, the industrial hemp bill, and it was supposed to be worked a couple weeks ago on our first turnaround, but there was an amendment on there from what I hear, and it's such a delicate issue that you got to be very careful because KBI is involved, obviously the Kansas Department of Ag is involved, a couple of, now there's a couple other agencies that got a little excited and want to be a part of it, but we kind of had to. There was one where the Department of Revenue wanted to put a certain tax on so many ounces, and it's just, we need to not do that. Let's just get this going, because this is what farmers need. It's another crop for them to grow.
Right.
So we had a lot of discussion about that, and we were able to pass out, I believe we were able to pass out a clean bill. There's one representative up there that he's been fighting for industrial hemp for years, but they said, no, we need to just keep this clean. This is what all parties have agreed to.
Okay.
KBI is one that they're kind of, and it makes sense to them because they're at that point where, how do we tell the difference? It looks like marijuana, it smells like marijuana, I can't test it right away.
Okay.
There can only be so much THC in it, and I get where they're coming from, but I've learned so much about industrial hemp these past 3 years.
Okay.
So I'm sure that Representative Rahjes has more to say about that, but.
Well, it's a process. I mean, I think a lot of people got excited when the Farm Bill passed, the federal Farm Bill. Senator McConnell really made that push from Kentucky. Kentucky's been doing it, at least more than what we have.
Sure.
Where it is right now in Kansas is still in that testing phase, and so there was an opportunity, or research, I guess, not testing, but research, and there's going to be a few research plots around. You had to pay a pretty exorbitant fee. So that's kind of where it is, because there's several processes. Just because the Farm Bill was passed, signed by the president, didn't mean, hey, it's okay, it's all good to go. There's a lot of rules and regulations. What I'm hearing is probably next year before the feds get all this taken care of, but we still can do the test, if you will, or the research, working through K-State and Department of Agriculture. So, with that being said, some of the best places to grow hemp is in north central Kansas. But there's a number of varieties. Again, we all are learning about this. And you brought up, Bob, an interesting point. Now you talk about medicinal. What we're looking at here with industrial is maybe some that you use for hemp rope and some of those products. I mean, it's going to evolve. Russell, Kansas has a company coming in to bring some of that equipment and to make it in Russell. So we've already kind of started down that process. But what has to happen anyway is once Kansas gets something done, it has to get passed on and approved by USDA. And so there's several steps that have to take place. And so it looks like probably next year it's going to be more commercialization, because they got to get the banking thing done to make sure the banking, and you can have the money exchange, and there's just a number of steps. I would say just everybody kind of worked the way it's worked the last few years. It took quite a while even to get to the point where we could do some research plots, and so we're slowly getting there. But we have to make sure it's done right. Representative Highland from Wamego worked tirelessly this year. They worked actually last year and then had to kind of redo everything because of the Farm Bill. And so I think there's a possibility. I know a lot of farmers are wanting to look at it as an alternative crop, not only for the hemp stalks in a sense, but of course CBD oil. And the oil that can be from it. So there's that group of people that are looking at it as well. There are small farmers, big farmers, a lot of different folks are looking at it. But again, the KBI, and quite honestly, I think the KBI maybe stepped out, because I was getting calls from farmers that were interested in growing it and saying that there was all these rules and regs. And it's like, well, how can there be rules and regs without a bill? So I think we kind of overstepped, and part of it was, well, we're going to put these high fees on to discourage people, and then of course that will do it. And that's what people say. Well, yeah, we'll approve it in this tax it to high enough that people won't want to do it. So there's that problem. There's going to be some growing pains. Everybody's trying to get on this thing first, because I think that's the thing, because everybody's is thinking that once it goes, we're just going to have a lot of this. But right now, if you grow it, you can't take it across the state line to Colorado. People think you can. No, there's got to be approved approval plan. So, but it's getting there. I think a year from now, we'll probably have more information.
Okay. Well, I want to say that I think we have about 7 minutes left in the show. So if you would like to call in to the show tonight, please do so now. 1-800-337-4788. And while we're waiting for someone to call in, do you have any other issues you want to bring up before the show ends that we haven't got to yet? I was going to bring up medical marijuana since we talked about hemp, but I didn't want to confuse the two issues because they are two different things. But is there any move in the legislature to look at medical?
Senate had a medical marijuana bill. I don't think the House will take it up. So
okay.
I don't think. I mean, honestly, I think this year we'll just try to get out with a budget, a school finance bill to send on to the courts and let the chips fall where they may. I think you'll see more action next year. And will you see a lot of action? Probably not, because guess what? Everybody's up for re-election. All the senators and all the members of the House. So
Leave that issue aside for a while.
well, it'll be interesting. And I think the veto session. We go in next week. We'll do our first adjournment at the end of next week, and then we're off to the 1st of May. And it'll be interesting to see what bills we all kind of agree on, the House and Senate, send to the governor, and then what she does. One of the bills, Senate Bill 22, she vetoed that. The tax bill, the decoupling, the food sales tax lowering, all that she vetoed. Will we have the votes in the House and Senate to override? Senate might. I can't speak for the senators, but I've talked to a few of them. They may have it. The House, don't know. Medicaid expansion, will the Senate take it up? One senator says, well, I want to have some more hearings on it, which is code word for probably ain't happening this year. So, but even though there's been a lot of people that have quite honestly been overreactionary, I understand their situation. They're not being heard. So, but I'm not going to, say who they were, because that's what they want. They want to draw attention to themselves. Folks were in the Capitol last week, broke the rules. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. I mean, so they said, well, it's free speech. Well, it is free speech, but let's follow the rules.
Yeah.
Let's follow the rules. Elections have consequences. They do. I mean, it happens on both sides.
Sure.
All
right. Anything you want that we haven't discussed yet?
I have so much on my mind, and then at this point, I don't.
Want to ask the question at all?
Yeah,
I realize that. Yeah.
No, I think this session has been great on the fact that we have a small freshman class. So, and we came in with a very strong freshman class. So I didn't feel as if we were starting all over with a lot of them. I know in one of my committees, Federal and State Affairs, we went head first into it, and we've had some good issues. We've had some good hearings. We had Convention of States brought up. We had Aiden's Law, which is mandating reporting, which it's stating that if you are inside someone's, or if you are living in a home, whether it's mom, dad, sister, grandma, living in a home, and there is sexual abuse or neglect or anything with that, you automatically are a mandated reporter. It was interesting. Last year, DCF was against it. This year, new leadership, DCF is for it.
Okay.
So there's some interesting ones on that. But that bill, we were supposed to hear it last week, but the carrier, he had to be gone for a family emergency, so we didn't actually hear that one.
Sports gambling, that you may see something come out right here towards the end. We don't know. We have money, trying to get money, or at least, or keep the rates for our disabled community. So there's some things that we're doing some good, and we'll just there'll be a lot of negotiating here at the end to see what will happen, and again, what doesn't happen will still lie for next year. So as they say, nothing really ever dies in the legislature. You can bring it back up, which we did. Some bills that didn't make it the last 2 years, they just reintroduced them, and so off we go again.
Yeah.
So basically how that works is something doesn't get passed this year, but someone can bring it up next year. But it's smoother because if the representatives are still in office, they understand the process, they understand the bill, they understand the text.
Yeah, in a sense, but
obviously it dies at the end of the legislation if it doesn't get passed that 1 year. But you can
at the end of the 2 years, right? Yeah. So like we had some hearings, and then we'll go back, and if we decide to work them, it'll be next year.
Very good. All right, we have one more call. This will be the last call. Bill from Oakley. Go ahead, Bill.
I was just wondering if there's been any discussion on reversing Governor Collier's decision on paternity leave and maternity leave, because to me it just seems excessive to give, especially the guy, 6 weeks off if that's what it is, and I could see giving a couple weeks for the female to recuperate and stuff. But I was just wondering if anybody's ever discussed that. Thank you.
I haven't heard of anything, and it was one of those things too where what are the odds it was done in the middle of an election year, and he was running for election. So I don't know if that was why it was done. I haven't heard a lot about it. I heard a lot of state employees who were excited about it, obviously, but I haven't heard of anything else.
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Sorry.
I don't know.
Well, all I would say was, again,
Okay.
thanks Smoky Hills for doing this. This is a great opportunity for us to kind of one-on-one through everybody's TV screen, and appreciate you as you every time you just get a little bit better, and eventually, we'll just
One of
be
these
here-
days.
we'll be here and just nod our heads.
One of these days I'll know what I'm doing. Is
But
that what you're saying?
again,
I say the same thing. It's okay.
next week, the first adjournment is next Friday or before, and so your representative should be in their district for about a month. So if they have town halls, go see them. That is so important. And if you don't have their cell phone, get it. I hope most of my constituents have my cell phone, and they call me morning or night, and that's what I want, because we're there to serve.
Very good. Very good. Now, you've been in for 2 years now, or 3?
This is my 3rd year.
Okay, good.
So I actually had a chance to intern for Representative Sue Boldra the year before when I was
okay.
in college.
Okay.
And then the year before I was interning. I moved to Topeka for the summer to intern for DCF underneath child support.
I see.
So I guess you could say this is my 5th session with working with everything,
Right.
but this is my 3rd as a legislator.
Okay, so we got about a minute left. You've been in since 2015. Seen lots of things.
It's been quite interesting.
Past 4 years?
I have moved 4 times. My office has moved 4 times. So I'm in a pretty. I'm on the south under the south portico now. So I said I wanted a window, so they did. But it's dark most of the time. But I can tell you when the governor comes and goes, because she parks. They come in with the expedition right there. So
there you go.
But no, it's good. We encourage folks to come see us, because it's always good to see folks from home.
Right.
It's a beautiful capital.
It is a beautiful building. Yes, it is. All right.
Absolutely. Ken and I were office mates for a year and a half.
yes.
So.
All right. Well, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's the end of the show. I'm going to wrap things up here. Again, Mike Walker from the Docking Institute at Fort Hays State University. I want to thank my guests. I guess I'm the host, so I'm the guest of the show. So I would wish everyone a happy evening. Thank you.